When I asked what time the engagement dinner was, my daughter said, "Oh, we had it yesterday." My name is Margaret Collins. And the moment my daughter told me that her engagement dinner had already happened without me, something inside me cracked so sharply, I swear I heard it. I had been standing in my kitchen, sunlight spilling across the counter, the phone pressed against my ear. My hands trembled as I asked a simple question. What time should I be ready for tonight? The silence on the other end stretched too long. Then her voice came, light, dismissive, casual. "Oh, Mom, we had it yesterday." At first, I didn't understand. My heart skipped, my throat dried. "Yesterday?" I repeated, as if maybe she had misspoken. Surely, I thought, she meant the rehearsal dinner, or some preliminary meeting. Surely not the engagement dinner, the celebration of her new life, the family milestone I had been waiting for. "Yes," she said, almost impatient. "It was yesterday. We decided not to make it a big deal." Not a big deal. Those words cut me sharper than any knife. I stood frozen, one hand gripping the countertop, as if I needed to hold on to something to keep from collapsing. The kitchen clock ticked on the wall. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked. The ordinary sounds of life continued. But inside me, something collapsed into silence. I tried to gather myself. Why didn't you tell me?" I asked softly. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was small, almost childlike. She exhaled, annoyed. "Mom, you make things complicated. I didn't want drama. It was just a dinner. Don't take it so personally. Don't take it so personally." How do you not take it personally when your only daughter erases you from one of the most important nights of her life? My chest tightened. I remembered all the birthdays I had planned for her as a child, the late-night sewing costumes for school plays, the times I stayed up nursing her fevers while whispering lullabies to soothe her. All of it, dismissed in a single sentence. "You weren't needed. You weren't wanted." I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but my throat closed, and instead I whispered, "I see." When the call ended, I stayed rooted in place. My coffee had gone cold. My reflection in the kitchen window looked like a stranger, pale, hollow-eyed, lips trembling. The room seemed to tilt slightly, as though the world itself was saying, "You don't belong anymore." I sat at the table and folded my hands, trying to breathe. A mother isn't supposed to feel this way, I thought. A mother is supposed to be included, cherished, honored, but I was none of those things to her. And then, shame crept in. Maybe I deserved it. Maybe I had been too protective when she was younger, too insistent on my way of doing things. Maybe I had said the wrong words one too many times. I thought of the distance that had grown between us, the way she rolled her eyes when I offered advice, the way she avoided telling me details about her life. But still, to not invite me? To not even tell me until after it happened? That was not a misunderstanding. That was deliberate. I poured the cold coffee down the sink and stood at the window, staring at the backyard that had once been filled with her laughter. She had played there as a little girl, running barefoot through the grass, her hair flying in the wind. I remembered how she used to call out, "Mom, watch me." Now she didn't want me to see her at all. The pain settled deep in my bones, heavy and unshakable. But under the pain, a small flicker of something else began to stir. Not anger, not yet, but awareness. Awareness that this was more than a mistake. This was a choice. That night, I sat alone at my dining table, eating reheated soup while imagining the dinner I had been excluded from. The clinking of glasses, the toasts, the photographs all captured without me, as though I had never existed. I imagined her sitting beside her fiancé, smiling for pictures, her hand resting proudly on his. I imagined everyone laughing, gossiping, maybe even discussing me. Did they mock me? Did she tell them I was too old-fashioned, too needy, too embarrassing to bring around? My spoon clattered against the bowl. I gripped the table hard because something inside me was boiling. That flicker inside me was no longer just awareness. It was the seed of something stronger. I told myself, remember this moment, Margaret. Remember what it feels like to be erased. Because one day, the people who erased you will need to remember who you are. And on that day, you won't let them forget. I went to bed restless, staring at the ceiling. The betrayal echoed in my ears like a cruel lullaby. And yet, beneath the ache, I felt a strange calmness, a resolve that was new to me. She thought I was invisible. She thought I had no voice. But she was wrong. This was only the beginning. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I tossed and turned, haunted by my daughter's words echoing in my mind. Oh, we had it yesterday. I replayed the phone call 100 times, looking for a different tone, a hidden hesitation, a sign that maybe she regretted what she'd done. But there was nothing, just cold finality. And as I stared into the darkness, other memories came creeping in shadows of moments when I'd felt the same sting of exclusion. There was her college graduation, for example. I had been so proud, so eager to celebrate her achievements. But when I arrived, her friends crowded around her, and she barely introduced me. She posed for endless photos with her classmates, professors, even her boyfriend at the time, but when I asked for just one picture of us together, she sighed and said, "Later, Mom, not now." That later never came. I still have the photo from that day, tucked in a box, her smiling in her cap and gown, standing in a sea of people, but I'm not in a single frame. Not one. It was as if she wanted to erase me from her story even then. And then there was Christmas 2 years ago. I spent days preparing cooking her favorite dishes, decorating the house, wrapping gifts with care. She showed up late, already wearing that pinched look of impatience. She scrolled on her phone during dinner, barely eating. After opening her presents, she said, "Thanks, Mom," without even looking me in the eye. Within an hour, she was gone. I sat there by the tree after she left, the lights blinking softly, wondering what I had done to make my love so heavy for her to carry. The more I thought about it, the more I realized. This exclusion was not new. The engagement dinner was only the loudest, clearest signal yet of something that had been happening for years. I just hadn't wanted to see it. A mother's heart is stubborn. We tell ourselves that our children love us, that the coldness is temporary, that the distance will close with time. We make excuses. We swallow our hurt. But the truth was there all along, in every skipped phone call, every rushed visit, every moment she looked through me instead of at me. I thought back further, to her teenage years. The slammed doors, the muttered insults, the way she accused me of being overbearing whenever I tried to protect her. At the time, I chalked it up to adolescence, the rebellion every mother and daughter must endure. I told myself she would come back around, that one day she would understand my sacrifices. But here we were, decades later. She hadn't come back. If anything, she had pushed me further away. I got out of bed and padded into the living room, unable to sit with my thoughts. The silence of the house pressed down on me, heavy and unkind. I looked at the framed photographs on the mantel. Her first day of kindergarten, holding my hand tightly. Her middle school recital, where I sat front row, clapping louder than anyone else. Her senior prom, where I helped her fasten the clasp of her necklace before she rushed out to meet her friends. Moments when she needed me, moments when she allowed me to exist in her story. But those moments had stopped long ago. Now, I wasn't even worth a chair at her engagement dinner. The humiliation burned hotter the more I thought about it. Did the other guests ask about me? Did she shrug and say I was busy? Or worse, did she make up some excuse to cover the truth, that she simply didn't want me there? I pictured her laughing with her future in-laws, presenting herself as the perfect daughter, the perfect bride-to-be, while pretending I didn't exist. My nails dug into my palms until it hurt. And yet, beneath the shame, I felt something deeper, clarity. This wasn't just about a dinner. It was about the kind of daughter she had become, and the kind of mother I had allowed myself to be. Always giving, always forgiving, always hoping. Never demanding respect, never drawing lines, never reminding her that I, too, was human, not just a shadow waiting on the sidelines. The exclusion had been gradual, like a slow erasure, and now it was complete. But if she thought I would simply fade quietly, she was mistaken. I sat at the dining table, a notepad in front of me. I began to write, not even sure what I was trying to capture. Fragments of memory, questions I wanted to ask her, things I had swallowed for too long. The words poured out. Why am I always an afterthought? Why is my love never enough? Why do you run from me instead of toward me? By the time the sun rose, I had filled several pages. My hands ached, my eyes stung, but something inside me felt lighter, as if by naming my pain, I had finally started to see it clearly. I folded the pages and tucked them away in a drawer. Not because I intended to send them to her. No, these words were for me. Proof that I still existed, that my story had weight, even if she tried to erase it. The day stretched ahead, heavy with silence, but somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "This isn't the end. This is the beginning of something you never dared before." And for the first time in years, I believed it. The day after the revelation of the engagement dinner, I moved through my house like a ghost. Every sound seemed hollow: the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator. Even the kettle whistling felt like a mockery of the warmth that should have filled my home. But the silence gave me space to think. And when I thought of my daughter, I realized her exclusion of me wasn't just about one dinner. It was the culmination of years of distance that had grown, little by little, between us. I remember when she was a teenager. She was beautiful, spirited, and defiant. Her voice sharp as glass when she wanted to cut me down. "Stop hovering, Mom," she'd snap when I asked who she was going out with. "You don't understand anything," she'd yell if I tried to warn her about the kind of boys who didn't care about her heart. At first, I told myself it was just adolescence, the phase every daughter goes through, testing the boundaries, pulling away from the safety of her mother. I thought she would return, like a tide that always finds its way back to shore. But the tide receded further each year. I remember her senior year of high school, when I waited up late one night. She had promised to be home by 11, but it was well past midnight. When she finally walked in, her face flushed with defiance, I asked, "Do you know how worried I've been?" She rolled her eyes and brushed past me, muttering, "You're so dramatic." I stood in the living room, hands shaking, the clock ticking louder with every second. It wasn't just her lateness that hurt me. It was the way she dismissed my concern, as if it were nothing, as if I were nothing. Then came college. I thought maybe distance would heal us, that she would miss me once she lived on her own. Instead, she grew further away. Phone calls were rushed, texts often unanswered. When I visited, she acted like a guest in her own apartment, polite, distant, and always eager to leave for plans with friends. I remember bringing her groceries once, bags heavy with the meals I knew she loved. She thanked me absently, barely looking up from her laptop. Later, when I asked if she wanted to cook something together, she said she was too busy, that maybe next time. But next time never came. When she introduced me to one of her boyfriends in those years, I thought perhaps I'd be included, maybe even respected as her mother. But he greeted me stiffly, as if I were just an obstacle in his path. I later overheard him say to her, "Your mom's a bit much, isn't she?" Instead of defending me, she laughed. I told myself it was just immaturity, that she would learn with time, that she would see the value in the woman who raised her. But time only sharpened the distance into something intentional. And yet, I never stopped trying. I called. I sent care packages. I waited for her visits like a child waiting for Christmas morning. Every time the door opened and she walked in, I felt the same rush of hope. Maybe this time it would be different. But it never was. It was like hugging someone who was already halfway out the door. Now, sitting in my quiet kitchen, I realized the engagement dinner was simply the final act in a story that had been unfolding for years. She hadn't forgotten me, no. Forgetting would have been kinder. She had chosen to exclude me. The realization burned through me. Not just sadness now, but a dawning awareness that I had been complicit in my own erasure. I had accepted scraps of affection, hoping they would someday add up to love. And what did it bring me? An empty chair at the most important table of her life. I stared at the framed photograph on the wall, the two of us, smiling, her in a bright summer dress at age 10, her arm thrown around my shoulders. Her smile in that picture was wide, open, unguarded. I wondered, where had that little girl gone? Did she still exist somewhere behind the coldness? Or had she erased even herself to fit the life she wanted? The thought stung so deeply I pressed a hand against my chest. But as the hours passed, a sharper thought began to form. Maybe it wasn't just about her. Maybe it was about me, about the version of me she wanted to erase. She didn't want the mother who sacrificed, who gave too much, who reminded her of obligations. She didn't want the woman who carried memories of scraped knees, broken hearts, and late-night talks. She wanted freedom. Freedom from me. And if she wanted that so badly, I would give it to her, but not in the way she expected. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. My reflection in the window looked older, sadder, but also clearer. For the first time, I wasn't just a mother begging for scraps of love. I was a woman who had been betrayed, humiliated, and silenced. And women like that don't disappear quietly. Have you ever been in a situation like this? If you were in this situation, would you forgive or take revenge? Comment below to let us know. I couldn't let it sit. The weight of being excluded from my daughter's engagement dinner pressed on me like a stone on my chest, and the longer I carried it, the heavier it grew. By the third day, I picked up the phone again, determined to confront her. My fingers trembled as I dialed. The ringing stretched like an eternity before she finally answered. "Hello, Mom." Her voice was flat, distracted, like she was already halfway out of the conversation. I cleared my throat, steadying myself. "I think we need to talk about the dinner." Silence, then a sigh. "Mom, not this again." "Yes, this again," I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. "You excluded me, your own mother, from one of the most important nights of your life. I need to understand why." On the other end, I heard a faint shuffle, as though she had moved the phone away from her ear. Finally, she said, "I didn't exclude you. We just decided it would be small." "Small?" I scoffed. "Your aunts were there, your cousins, even your father's old colleagues. But not me? How is that small?" Her tone hardened. "Because you make everything about you, Mom. You always have." The words stung. "Everything about me? I dedicated my life to raising you. I sacrificed." "See?" She cut me off, her voice rising. "This is exactly what I mean. You always remind me of how much you gave up, how much I owe you. It's suffocating." Her words pierced me. I sat down heavily, clutching the phone. "Is that really how you see me?" I whispered. I didn't want you there to embarrass me," she blurted. Then, realizing what she'd said, she went quiet. The silence between us was louder than any scream. I felt my heart splinter. "Embarrass you? After everything I've done for you? That's what I am to you now? An embarrassment?" She groaned, impatient. "Don't twist my words. I just didn't want things to get complicated." "Complicated how?" I demanded. "By having your mother sitting at the table, by acknowledging the woman who raised you." Her fiancé's voice murmured faintly in the background. She must have put me on speakerphone. "We don't need to do this, Anna," he muttered. I froze. They were together, and now he was listening. The realization twisted the knife deeper. "Put me off speaker," I said sharply. She hesitated. Then, defiantly, "Number. He's part of my life now. If you want to talk to me, you talk to both of us." My blood ran cold. She had aligned herself with him. shutting me out not just of one dinner, but of her entire future. I steadied my voice. Then hear me, both of you. What you did was cruel, and it will not be forgotten. She gasped softly, as if my words startled her. But instead of softening, she grew colder. Mom, I don't want to fight. I just want peace. Please, stop making this about you. Peace. That word tasted bitter. For her, peace meant my silence, my absence, my erasure. I ended the call without another word. My hand shook as I set the phone down, my pulse thundering in my ears. The confrontation hadn't brought clarity. It had only widened the gulf. I sat at the dining table long after the call, staring at the grain of the wood. The words replayed in my mind. I didn't want you to embarrass me. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. She had looked at me, her own mother, and decided I was a liability. The next weekend, I tried again, this time in person. I drove to her apartment, clutching a basket of homemade food, a peace offering, though I didn't know why I was the one trying to make peace. She opened the door, her hair tied back, eyes cool and unreadable. Mom, you shouldn't have come. I needed to see you, I said firmly, pushing the basket into her hands. She glanced at it, lips pressed tight. You can't keep showing up like this. I have my own life now. Mah. I know, I said, my throat tight. But you can't erase me from it. She looked away, her jaw tense. I didn't erase you. I just needed space. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. Space is one thing. Banning me from your engagement dinner is another. That wasn't space. That was cruelty. Her fiancé appeared behind her, his hand resting possessively on her shoulder. His eyes slid over me, cool and dismissive, as though I were nothing more than an unwelcome guest. My daughter leaned into him, almost unconsciously. I can't do this right now, she said flatly. Please leave. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the two of them framed in the doorway. The man who had replaced me in her life. The daughter who no longer saw me as anything but an obstacle. Finally, I nodded. If that's what you want. I turned and walked away, my spine straight, refusing to let them see the way my eyes burned. When I got home, I set the untouched basket of food on the counter. The silence of the house pressed in again. But this time, it didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like fuel. I realized then that confrontation would never bring me peace. She had already chosen her side, and it wasn't mine. If I wanted dignity, if I wanted justice, I would need to find another way. A quieter way. A way she would never see coming. A week after that failed confrontation, I was invited to a casual Sunday brunch at my sister's house. I almost didn't go. My heart still felt raw, bruised from my daughter's dismissal, and I wasn't sure I could face the stares, the questions, the whispers. But something inside me urged me forward. Perhaps it was stubbornness. Perhaps it was the desire to see how much everyone else already knew. I drove across town with a tight chest and a smile practiced in the mirror. The kind of smile that told the world, I'm fine, even when I'm not. The moment I stepped into my sister's dining room, I could feel it. A hush in the air, like the pause before a storm. Relatives were already seated around the table, plates clinking, laughter spilling into the room. But when they saw me, the energy shifted. Oh, Maggie, my sister said, rising to kiss my cheek. Her embrace was warm, but her eyes flickered with something else. Pity, maybe, or guilt. I sat down, smoothing the napkin across my lap, trying to ignore the way conversations faltered, how eyes darted quickly away from mine. Then it began. Anna looked so radiant at her engagement dinner. One of my cousins gushed, her voice too loud, too cheerful. That dress, oh, it was stunning. Another relative chimed in. And the decorations, so tasteful, So elegant. They must have spent weeks planning it. Each word was a hammer blow, pounding against my ribs. I forced myself to smile. Yes, I said softly. I'm sure it was lovely. But inside, my blood burned. It didn't stop there. They spoke of the speeches, the laughter, the photos. Someone even pulled out their phone, flipping through snapshots of the dinner I had never been invited to. There she was, my daughter, glowing in candlelight, her hand entwined with her fiancé's, smiling for the camera as if she had no mother at all. I stared at the images, my stomach twisting. The world had moved on without me, celebrating her joy while I sat at home in silence. And the worst part? No one questioned my absence. No one asked why I wasn't there. It was as if they all knew, and none of them cared enough to challenge it. At one point, my aunt leaned close, her voice lowered. Maggie, I thought you decided not to go. Anna said you wanted to keep things quiet. My throat tightened. So that was the story. She hadn't just erased me, she had rewritten me. She had painted me as the one who chose absence, as though I had willingly stepped aside. The lie hit harder than the exclusion itself. I smiled faintly, though my hands clenched under the table. That's not quite how it happened, I said, my tone measured, but no one pressed further. They nodded politely and shifted the subject, eager to avoid discomfort. My truth wasn't convenient for their cheerful brunch. As the chatter continued, I retreated inside myself. I listened to the clinking of forks, the hum of voices, the occasional burst of laughter. Each sound was a reminder of the wall between me and the rest of them. It wasn't just my daughter who had erased me, the entire family had complied. They had accepted my absence, swallowed the lie, and gone on with their celebrations. To them, I was already invisible. I excused myself early, claiming fatigue. My sister looked concerned, but didn't stop me. Perhaps she suspected the truth, but lacked the courage to say it aloud. Driving home, the silence in my car felt suffocating. My daughter's glowing smile from those photos burned in my mind. Not once, in those captured moments, did she look like she missed me. No, she looked relieved. Back in my empty kitchen, I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the table, staring into nothing. That brunch had confirmed what I feared. She wasn't ashamed of excluding me. She wasn't sorry. She was rewriting the narrative, casting me as the problem, the burden, the one who had chosen to step aside. And the family, whether out of politeness or cowardice, let her. I pressed my palms against the cool surface of the table, breathing deeply. The humiliation was searing, but alongside it, something else was rising. Resolve. I had been a schoolteacher for 30 years. I knew how to read people, how to notice what others missed, how to spot the smallest lie in a child's eyes. And I could feel it now, behind my daughter's carefully constructed story, behind the perfect smiles in those photos. There was something fragile, something she didn't want me to see. And that was my way back in. I told myself, this isn't over. If she thought she could erase me, she would soon learn the truth. Mothers may be pushed aside, but they are never powerless. And the next time she looked at me, she wouldn't see an embarrassment. She would see the woman she underestimated. After the brunch, I withdrew into myself for a while. I didn't call, didn't ask questions, didn't try to pry my way back into her life. I needed time to breathe, to gather my strength. But life has a cruel way of delivering truths, whether you're ready for them or not. It was at the grocery store of all places, where I stumbled upon another piece of the puzzle. I had gone to pick up a few things, moving down the aisles with the kind of heavy steps that come from carrying more in your heart than in your cart. And then I heard it. Two women by the produce section, whispering to each other, their laughter low but sharp. Did you see the pictures from Anna's dinner? So elegant, one said. The other snorted. Yes, and thank God her mother wasn't there. She would have made a scene. My breath caught. I froze in place, my hand hovering over a bag of apples, my ears strained, my body rigid, every nerve alert. The first woman lowered her voice, though not enough. Anna told me her mom can be difficult, overly emotional, always trying to take the spotlight. She didn't want her spoiling the night. A cold flush spread over me. Overly emotional, spoiling things. Was that how she described me now? The second woman tutted. Poor Anna. Imagine having to deal with a mother like that. No wonder she left her out. Their laughter sliced through me like glass. I turned away quickly, my face burning. My chest felt tight, as if someone had wrapped iron bands around my ribs. These weren't strangers talking about a distant family. They were talking about me, about my daughter, about the story she had woven so convincingly that others accepted it as fact. And worse, they weren't even shocked. They pitied her, as though she were the victim, forced to endure the burden of a mother who was too much. I abandoned my cart and hurried out of the store, my vision blurring with tears. By the time I reached my car, anger had replaced the humiliation. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, not from weakness this time, but from fury. How dare she? How dare my own daughter tarnish me like this, painting me as some hysterical, needy woman? I had spent my life carrying her, protecting her, shaping her future, and now she reduced me to a caricature, something to be pitied and mocked. That night, I sat in my living room in the dark, replaying the gossip over and over in my head. Each phrase echoed like a cruel refrain. Overly emotional, spoiling the night. Thank God her mother wasn't there. I realized then, it wasn't enough that she had excluded me. She was rewriting me in the eyes of others, chiseling away at my reputation until there was nothing left but a distorted shadow. And people believed her. The realization settled, like lead in my stomach. If I didn't do something, soon my absence at her wedding, her milestones, her future gatherings would not be questioned. It would be expected. Because who would want an embarrassing mother at their side? I rose from my chair, my legs unsteady but my resolve sharp. I had endured gossip before neighbors, colleagues, even relatives who thought they knew me better than they did, but never had it come from my own blood. This wasn't just betrayal. It was character assassination. And I wouldn't let her get away with it. A week later, I attended another family function, this time at my cousin's house. It was supposed to be casual, just tea, pastries, catching up. But casual gatherings are often where truths slip through the cracks. I sat quietly in the corner, listening, and I heard it again. She's sensitive, that's all, one of my in-laws said when my name came up. We have to handle her carefully. Another nodded. Anna's lucky she's breaking away. Sometimes parents cling too tightly. It's not healthy, my teen. The words dripped with judgment, cloaked in false concern. They smiled as they said it, sipping tea as if they were speaking of the weather, but I could hear the poison beneath. I left early, making some excuse about errands. My cousin kissed my cheek, but her eyes flickered with the same pity I had seen before. It was spreading this narrative of me as the difficult mother. My daughter's story was seeping into every corner of the family, staining my name. As I drove home, the anger in me hardened into something colder, sharper. They thought I was fragile. They thought I was too emotional. They thought I would crumble quietly and fade into the background. But they were wrong. I began to pay closer attention after that. I noticed who avoided my eyes at gatherings, who whispered when I left the room, who quickly changed the subject when I entered. And I realized something important. If they could talk about me so easily, they could also listen. If my daughter could plant seeds of doubt in their minds, then so could I. But my seeds would be sharper, my truths heavier. I didn't know yet how or when, but I knew this much. The day would come, when they would see me, not as the burden, not as the embarrassment, but as the one holding the mirror to their lies. That night, alone in my bedroom, I looked at myself in the mirror. My reflection was tired, lined, weary from years of giving too much. But in my eyes, I saw something new. Not just hurt, not just sadness. I saw steel. The whispers, the gossip, the judgments, they had sharpened my pain, but they had also given me clarity. My daughter wasn't simply careless. She wasn't just thoughtless. No, she had deliberately kept me away. But why? I turned that question over and over in my mind. Late at night, staring at the ceiling, I dissected every possible reason. Was it shame about my modest life? About my simple house and my years as a teacher? Was it resentment for the sacrifices I reminded her of? Or was it something else? Something she hadn't dared say aloud? The answer came unexpectedly, slipped out in a careless conversation that wasn't meant for my ears. It happened at my sister's house, again. She had invited both me and my daughter over for coffee on a Saturday afternoon. I hesitated to go, but curiosity pushed me. Perhaps I wanted to see my daughter face to face, to look into her eyes, and finally read the truth there. She arrived with her fiancé, polished and perfect, her smile wide enough for photographs but thin when directed at me. She kissed my sister's cheek, nodded stiffly at me, and settled onto the couch. I stayed quiet, sipping my tea, listening. At one point, my sister excused herself to fetch more biscuits. My daughter leaned toward her fiancé, her voice low, but not low enough. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If my mom had been there, she would have, I don't know, said something or worn the wrong thing or made the night about her. She doesn't know how to blend in. I needed everything to look perfect in front of your parents." Her fiancé murmured something I couldn't catch. And then my daughter said it, the sentence that struck me like a blade. I couldn't risk her embarrassing me. There it was. The truth, spoken plain, not forgotten, not overlooked, but excluded, because in her eyes, I was a threat to her image. I sat frozen, my teacup trembling in my hands. The liquid rippled inside it, mirroring the storm in my chest. She wasn't afraid of me ruining her happiness. She was afraid of me ruining her presentation. It wasn't about family. It wasn't about love. It was about appearances. And in her world, I didn't fit the picture. When my sister returned, the conversation shifted. My daughter smiled, bright and charming, as though she hadn't just carved me out of her life with a few whispered words. I excused myself soon after, claiming a headache. Driving home, the world blurred past my window, the houses, the trees, the people on sidewalks. My vision tunneled, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. She had reduced me, her mother, to nothing more than a potential embarrassment. At home, I sat in the living room without turning on the lights. The house felt colder that night, emptier. I replayed her words again and again, until they etched themselves into my bones. Embarrassment. I thought of all the years I had spent trying to give her everything. I thought of the sacrifices, the jobs I turned down to be present at her recitals, the meals I skipped so she could have a little extra when times were tight, the tears I swallowed whenever she lashed out as a teenager. And now, in the eyes of the woman she had become, all of that added up to nothing more than a flaw. But alongside the pain, a strange calmness came over me, because now I understood. It wasn't vague distance anymore. It wasn't mystery. It was clear, deliberate, calculated. She had cut me out to protect her image. And if she could play calculated, so could I. The next day, I dug out old boxes from the attic. Photographs, letters, school records, family documents. I spread them across the dining table, creating a map of her life, our life, my sacrifices. It wasn't revenge yet, not fully. It was preparation. If she wanted to erase me, then I would remind her, and everyone else, exactly who I was. Not by screaming, not by begging, but by showing truths she couldn't bury. As I sifted through the papers, I came across an old binder receipts and bills from the years I supported us alone after her father left. Tuition payments, medical bills, rent checks written from my modest salary as a teacher. Every line was a record of what I had carried. I ran my fingers over the faded ink, my chest tight with both grief and pride. She wanted to erase me from her present, but she couldn't erase the past. And the past, I realized, was my weapon. That night, I wrote in my journal again. My handwriting was sharper now, my thoughts clearer. She believes I am an embarrassment, I wrote. She believes I don't belong in the picture she paints, but she forgets I am the canvas. Without me, there is no picture. Without me, she has no story. I closed the journal with a firm hand. The hurt was still there, raw, gaping, but it no longer left me paralyzed. It fueled me. For the first time since she said those words, "Oh, we had it yesterday," I didn't feel invisible. I felt awake. And with that awakening came a promise. If she thought she could strip me of my dignity, then I would show her just how wrong she was. The house had never felt so quiet. Even in the years when my daughter had been away at college, there was still a kind of echo of her here. A presence in the photographs on the wall, the half-packed boxes in her old bedroom, the memories stitched into the curtains and the floorboards. But after hearing the truth that she had excluded me, out of fear of embarrassment, the silence became unbearable. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was the absence of meaning. I spent that evening walking from room to room like a ghost. In the kitchen, I remembered teaching her to bake cookies, her small hands dusted with flour. In the living room, I remembered her sprawled across the couch with textbooks, asking me to quiz her before exams. In the hallway, I remembered the slammed doors, the arguments, the tears. All of it, every memory crashed into me at once. And the question rose again, relentless. How did we get here? How did I become someone she hides away, like a shameful secret? By midnight, I sat at the dining table, staring at the stack of papers I had gathered: receipts, report cards, photographs, all proof of my years of devotion. They looked like evidence at a trial, as though I were preparing to defend myself in a court that no one had summoned me to. My chest ached, my breathing shallow. A heavy thought pressed against me. Maybe I've already lost her. Maybe no matter what I do, she will never see me again, not truly. The despair was so thick. I pressed my face into my hands, sobs tearing through me, raw and unrestrained. For the first time, I allowed myself to cry the way I hadn't since her father left. But as the tears came, another realization surfaced. This was what she wanted. She wanted me broken, silent, invisible. She wanted the world to believe I was fragile, hysterical, unfit to stand beside her in the picture of her perfect life. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. Because if I gave in to the despair, if I let myself be erased, then she would win. And I couldn't allow that. I wiped my face, the tears drying into salt on my cheeks. I pushed the papers into a neat stack, my hands steadier now. "No," I whispered into the quiet. "You don't get to erase me." The words weren't loud, but they carried weight. They echoed in the emptiness of the house, a vow spoken to no one but myself, and yet it was enough. Over the following days, I felt the weight of solitude more acutely than ever. Friends called, asking if I was well, but I gave them vague reassurances. What could I say? That my only child had branded me an embarrassment and carved me out of her future? That my family pitied me instead of defending me? No, this was not a story I was ready to share. Not yet. Instead, I lived with it in silence. But silence, I discovered, is not always weakness. Sometimes it is preparation. One afternoon, I found myself in her old bedroom. The posters were gone, the bookshelves half empty, but the air still carried a faint trace of her perfume. I sat on the bed, clutching one of her childhood stuffed animals, and closed my eyes. I remembered the little girl she used to be, the one who clung to me when she was scared of thunderstorms, the one who proudly showed me every A on her report cards, the one who once told me, "Mom, when I get married, You'll sit right beside me." That little girl was gone. And I realized, with brutal clarity, I wasn't mourning just the present. I was mourning her. The daughter I thought I knew. The daughter who had vanished long before this engagement dinner. The grief was sharp, but it also clarified something in me. If she wanted a new story, one where I was invisible, then I had no choice but to write my own. I could not force her to see me, but I could make sure that when she tried to erase me, the truth would rise undeniable, unshakable. And perhaps, when the time came, she would finally feel the weight of what she had thrown away. I began small. I wrote lists not of grievances, but of facts. Every sacrifice, every moment I had carried her alone. Every achievement she owed in part to me. The tuition bills, the countless meals, the quiet nights when I held her fears at bay. Not because I needed her gratitude anymore. That part of me had died. But because truth matters, and if she wanted to live inside a lie, I would be ready to pierce it when the moment was right. That night, I stood at the mirror in my bedroom. My face was tired, older than I remembered. The skin beneath my eyes, etched with grief. But behind that, I saw something stronger. Defiance. "This is my breaking point," I told the reflection. "But it will not be my end." My voice trembled, but it didn't falter. I went to bed knowing I had crossed a threshold. Before, I had been clinging to her, begging silently for her love. Now, I understood. Love cannot be begged. Respect cannot be demanded. It must be earned. And if she could not see my worth, then I would show it in ways she could never ignore. For the first time in weeks, I slept without tears. The ache remained, but beneath it was a new foundation, solid and steady. I was no longer just a mother, abandoned by her daughter. I was a woman who had been underestimated. And soon, very soon, that mistake would cost them all. Resolve is a strange thing. Once it takes root, it grows quietly, spreading through every thought, every action, until it becomes part of your blood. After that night, the night I declared to my reflection that I would no longer be erased, I began to see everything differently. My daughter thought she could reduce me to silence. But I still had eyes, I still had ears, and I still had the patience of a woman who had endured far worse than whispered insults. So I began to watch. At first, it was small. I listened carefully during family gatherings, not just to the words people spoke, but to the gaps, the silences, the subjects they avoided. I noticed the way my daughter's fiancé stiffened when money was mentioned. I caught the way his parents exchanged quick, tense looks whenever his career was praised. And slowly, a picture began to form. There were cracks in the image they projected, hairline fractures they thought no one noticed. But I noticed, because I had been a teacher for decades. I knew how to catch lies before they were spoken. One afternoon, while visiting my sister again, I, accidentally, lingered near the kitchen while my daughter and her fiancé chatted in the living room. He was complaining about his job. "I can't keep covering for them," he muttered. "If this comes out before the wedding, it'll ruin everything." Her voice was sharp. "Then make sure it doesn't. My mother is already a problem. I can't have her sniffing around and adding fuel to this." My chest tightened. So there was something to hide. From then on, I began my quiet investigation. It wasn't dramatic. No late-night break-ins or confrontations. Just patience, observation, and the subtle collection of truths. I asked gentle questions at family events, feigning casual curiosity. "So, how's the new job treating him?" I'd ask one cousin. "Does he still work with that firm downtown?" People talk when you make them feel comfortable. And I listened, storing away every detail. I visited the library, combed through public records, searched the marriage license filings, the business registries. I may have been retired, but I wasn't useless. Piece by piece, the cracks widened into fissures. What I found shocked even me. His family wasn't the picture of wealth and respectability they pretended to be. There were debts, heavy ones, businesses that had quietly folded, investments that had gone sour, and worse, whispers of lawsuits. It wasn't just a few financial troubles. It was rot, hidden beneath polished smiles and elegant dinners. No wonder they had wanted me silent. No wonder they painted me as unstable, emotional, embarrassing. If I had been in that engagement dinner, if I had asked even one of my direct questions, their facade might have cracked. I sat in my kitchen one evening with the documents spread before me. My heart pounded, but not with fear this time. It was validation. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't some hysterical burden. I had been excluded not because I was weak, but because I was too dangerous to their fragile image. And now, I held their secrets in my hands. Still, I didn't rush. Revenge, I knew, is not served in haste. I kept gathering, quietly, calmly, as if nothing had changed. When my daughter visited rare, brief, and cold, as always, I played the role she expected. The quiet, diminished mother. The woman who wouldn't dare cause a scene. But inside, I was sharper than ever. Every word she spoke, every nervous glance toward her fiancé, every half-truth they fed the family, I filed it away. Because one day soon, I would no longer be silent. One evening, I sat by the fireplace, the documents stacked neatly beside me. I thought of all the times I had been called overly emotional, too dramatic, a burden, and I smiled a small, sharp smile. Because the truth was, I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to fight or scream. All I needed was the right moment. And when it came, I would hold up their secrets to the light, calmly, steadily, with the patience of a woman who had spent her life underestimated. For now, I let them think they had won. Let them whisper about me, pity me, erase me from their photographs. Because soon, very soon, they would learn the truth. And when they did, there would be no erasing me then. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes, the firelight flickering across the walls. The silence of the house no longer felt suffocating. It felt like strategy. I wasn't invisible. I was waiting. And when the moment came, they would see me clearer than ever before. How do you think they will react when I reveal that to everyone? People often mistake quietness for weakness. They think the woman who does not shout, who does not slam her fists on the table, is powerless. But I had spent my whole life in silence in classrooms, filled with noisy children, in a house where the clamor of family drowned out my own needs. I knew how to wait, how to observe, how to use patience as a shield. And now, I realized, as a sword, when I first became a teacher, patience was survival. 30 children in one room, all buzzing with energy, all demanding attention. If you lost your temper, you lost them. You had to notice the small things instead. The child whose eyes lingered too long on the window, the one who never raised her hand, but knew the answer every time. And it struck me now. The same skill I had honed in the classroom was the one I needed for this war. Watch, wait, notice what others overlooked. My daughter and her fiancé believed I was blind. They thought excluding me would leave me powerless. But I had eyes sharper than they knew. I began writing everything down in a notebook, not my feelings this time, but facts, dates, names, overheard phrases. Who hesitated when asked about money? Which relative avoided discussing the fiancé's business ventures? At first, the details seemed small, insignificant, but when you've spent decades piecing together children's fibs, you know how small lies stack into bigger truths. And what I saw was a pattern. Their wealth was not solid. It was borrowed, stretched thin, presented with careful polish, but crumbling beneath. I took long walks through town, stopping at the courthouse, the library, the registry office. I learned to navigate public records, to find the trails they thought were buried. Business closures, lawsuits, debts, under his father's name. The kind of things that never make it into the smiling photographs they posted online. Each discovery steadied me. Every page I copied felt like a brick in the wall. I was building a wall between their lies and the truth they feared. And as I stacked those bricks, I felt my strength return. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about dignity. For so long, I had believed the story others told about me. That I was fragile, dramatic, an embarrassment. But the more I uncovered, the clearer it became. I wasn't the weak one here. They were. They were the ones living on borrowed time, hiding behind facades. And I? I was the one who saw clearly. At night, I would sit in the quiet of my home, the documents spread out on the table, the fire crackling softly. I felt no rush to reveal them, no desperation, because that was another thing I had learned from years in the classroom. Timing is everything. You don't scold a child in the heat of their tantrum. You wait until the quiet moment, when their defenses are down, when your words will land with the most weight. And so it would be with them. I remembered something my grandmother used to say: still water runs deep, and it drowns quietly. That became my mantra. Let them underestimate me. Let them laugh behind their wine glasses and call me weak. Still, water runs deep. And when the time came, I would drown their lies in truth. Meanwhile, I played the role they expected. At gatherings, I smiled faintly, spoke softly, nodded at their stories. I didn't protest when someone dismissed me, didn't bristle when they called me sensitive. They thought my silence meant defeat. But in reality, I was memorizing every word, every look, every slip. One evening, at another family dinner, I noticed the fiancé's mother watching me closely. Her smile was pleasant, but her eyes betrayed suspicion. Perhaps she sensed something shifting, a change in my posture, the calmness that wasn't surrender but calculation. She leaned across the table at one point, her tone light. "Maggie, dear, I hope you've made peace with everything. Weddings are stressful enough without complications." Complications. I heard the warning in her voice. I smiled sweetly. "Oh, I'm at peace," I replied. "I've learned patience, and patience always pays off." Her eyes flickered, just for a second. Enough for me to know. She felt the current beneath the still water. When I got home, I opened my notebook again, flipping through the pages. Every line was a reminder of the strength I'd forgotten. I had the strength of a woman who survived abandonment, who raised a daughter alone, who built a life out of scraps, and kept moving even when love failed her. They thought they had taken my power, but they had only reminded me where it had always been: in my endurance, my resilience, my quiet observation. As I closed the book, I whispered to myself, "You've underestimated me for the last time." The words didn't shake. They rang clear, steady, certain. And deep in my bones, I knew, when the truth came out, I wouldn't need to raise my voice. The truth would speak loudly enough. The more I dug, the more their polished image crumbled. It started with a single document, a notice of a lawsuit against the fiancé's father, buried in public record, tucked between endless filings. At first, I thought it might be a mistake. But the more I read, the clearer it became. He had been sued multiple times over failed investments, promises made, money taken, and nothing delivered. I copied the records, folded them neatly into a folder, and slipped them into my bag. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from certainty. Once you find one crack, you start to see them everywhere. I learned that their family's business empire was little more than a patchwork of ventures restaurants that had quietly closed, a construction project that never finished, debts passed from one name to another like a shell game. It was smoke and mirrors. And yet, they had fooled everyone. Everyone but me. One evening, I invited an old friend over, someone I trusted, someone who had worked in real estate for years. I poured us tea and slid the papers across the table. He scanned them, his brow furrowed. Maggie, this doesn't look good. If they're trying to merge families through this marriage, your daughter is walking into a storm. My stomach twisted. And they don't want me there because they know I'll see it. Because they know I'll ask questions they can't answer. He nodded grimly. They've underestimated you. But you're right. If this comes out at the wrong time, it could ruin them. That word ruin settled into me like a seed. I hadn't gone looking for revenge at first. All I wanted was dignity. To remind my daughter that I existed, that I mattered. But now I saw how fragile their world was. And I realized, if they wanted to erase me, I could just as easily erase them. I began to notice more during gatherings. The fiancé's father, avoiding direct questions about his business. The mother bragging about their vacation home, though I had seen records of it being repossessed. My daughter's fiancé, clenching his jaw when someone mentioned money. Each slip was a thread, and I pulled at them slowly, patiently, weaving them into a tapestry of truth. I didn't need to exaggerate. I didn't need to invent. Their lies were heavy enough to crush them without my help. At night, I lay awake thinking of my daughter. Did she know? Was she complicit in the deception? Or was she blind, caught up in the glitter of their facade? I wanted to believe she was simply naive, that she had been swept up in their promises. But then, I remembered her words. I couldn't risk her embarrassing me. Number she knew. Maybe not all of it, but enough. Enough to know that her perfect picture would crack if I were there. And she chose to protect the lie instead of her mother. One Sunday, after church, I overheard two of the in-laws speaking again. The Collins woman doesn't fit, one whispered. She doesn't know how to carry herself. Imagine her sitting next to the board members. She's not the image they want, the other replied. Anna made the right choice, keeping her away. I walked past them with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. They thought they were safe in their little circle of judgment. But I carried their words like stones in my pocket, reminders of the battle I was preparing for. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Timing mattered. Instead, I prepared. I organized the documents into neat folders, each labeled, each ready to be presented if, or rather, when the moment came. I practiced what I might say, calm and steady, no tremor in my voice. I imagined their faces when I laid the truth bare, when I turned the spotlight they had tried to avoid directly onto them. And every time I pictured it, the ache in my chest dulled just a little. But there was another ache too, the ache of betrayal. Because no matter how strong I felt, no matter how sharp my resolve became, there was still the wound of knowing my own daughter had chosen them over me. She had believed their wealth mattered more than my love, that appearances outweighed blood. That wound would never fully heal. But perhaps, when she saw their lies collapse, she would finally understand. Perhaps then she would see who had truly stood by her side, all along. One evening, as I closed my folders and set them aside, I caught my reflection in the darkened window. I looked older than I remembered. Lines carved deep around my eyes, gray streaks brighter in my hair. But behind the age, I saw something new. A woman not broken, but sharpened. I whispered to the reflection, as though to my daughter herself. You thought I was the embarrassment, but soon they'll see who the real embarrassment is. And for the first time, in a long while, I almost smiled. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. My sister invited the whole family to her house for a formal dinner, a celebration of the upcoming wedding. Everyone would be there. My daughter, her fiancé, his parents, the cousins, the aunts and uncles, who had already begun whispering behind my back. When I received the invitation, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to decline, to avoid another night of humiliation. But another part, the part that had been quietly preparing, collecting, and sharpening the truth, knew this was the moment I had been waiting for. Still, water runs deep. And deep water waits for the right time to flood. The evening of the dinner, I dressed simply but carefully. A dark blouse, modest jewelry, my hair pinned neatly, not flashy, not desperate to impress, just dignified. When I arrived, the room was alive with chatter, laughter, clinking glasses, the hum of conversation. My daughter was radiant, glowing under the admiring eyes of her fiancé's family. She looked at me briefly when I walked in, her smile faltering for just a second before she composed herself. I smiled back. Calm, steady, unreadable. The meal passed in waves of conversation. I kept my voice soft, my posture measured. I let them think I was subdued, diminished. They barely noticed me, and that was fine, because I was waiting. And then, as dessert was served, the conversation shifted as it always did to the fiancé's promising career, his family's business ventures, their plans for a grand future. Compliments flowed like wine. That was my moment. I set down my fork, folded my hands neatly in my lap, and spoke. My voice was quiet but firm, cutting through the chatter like glass. It's remarkable, I said, how carefully appearances can be maintained, almost like theater. The table stilled. Eyes turned toward me. My daughter's smile froze. His mother laughed nervously. What do you mean, Maggie? I met her gaze steadily. I mean that it's one thing to project wealth and respectability. It's another to sustain it when the foundations are crumbling. A murmur rippled around the table. My daughter shifted in her chair, her face pale. Mom, she hissed under her breath. Don't. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I reached into my bag, pulled out the folder I had so carefully prepared, and laid it gently on the table. Did you think no one would notice the lawsuits? The debts? The failed businesses hidden under different names? The fiancé stiffened, his father's face drained of color. His mother's fork clattered against her plate. My daughter's eyes widened in horror. What are you doing? She demanded, her voice trembling. I looked at her, my gaze unwavering. I am reminding you, and everyone here, that truth does not disappear just because you erase the people who see it. I slid the papers across the table. Public records, I said calmly. Nothing secret. Nothing fabricated. Just facts. Facts you've all ignored because it was easier to believe in the illusion. For a long moment, silence reigned. The only sound was the faint rustle of papers as a cousin reached out, curiosity overcoming caution. Their eyes scanned the documents, widening with each line. Whispers began, low at first, then louder. Is this true? Someone asked. How much debt? Lawsuits? Multiple? The fiancé tried to protest, his voice cracking. This is old, exaggerated, but the evidence spoke louder than he ever could. I remained still, my hands folded neatly, my voice calm. You excluded me because you feared I would embarrass you, I said, my eyes on my daughter. But the truth is, I was the only one who could see clearly. And now, everyone else sees it too. Her face crumpled, torn between anger and shame. Why would you do this to me? She whispered, her voice breaking. I leaned forward slightly, my tone soft but unyielding. No, Anna, you did this to yourself. You erased me to protect an illusion, and illusions always collapse. The fiancé's parents tried to recover, stammering excuses, but the tide had already turned. Relatives murmured among themselves, the air thick with judgment, but this time, not at me. For once, the whispers weren't about how embarrassing I was. They were about them, about the lies, about the facade, about the family that had tried so hard to present themselves as untouchable, only to be exposed by the mother they dismissed. I didn't linger in the aftermath. I rose from the table with quiet dignity, gathering my bag. I've said what needed to be said, I told them. The rest is yours to decide. And then I left, leaving behind the stunned silence, the shifting alliances, the cracks that could no longer be patched. Driving home that night, my hands trembled on the steering wheel. Not from fear, but from release. For so long, I had been the invisible one, the erased one, the mother left out of the picture. But now? Now I was the one they would never be able to forget. The night after the reveal, I sat in my quiet house, the folder of documents no longer necessary. I had placed it back in the drawer, knowing it had already served its purpose. The silence around me was different now. It wasn't the suffocating quiet of being erased. It was the calm after a storm, heavy, yes, but cleansing. I thought about their faces, the shock, the shame. I thought about my daughter, her eyes wide with disbelief, as the illusion she had built shattered in front of her. And I thought about myself, the woman they had dismissed, the mother they had silenced, the person they thought too fragile, too emotional to matter. Yet in the end, it had been my patience, my endurance, my quiet strength that had undone them. In the days that followed, I heard the ripples spreading. Relatives whispered, but not about me this time. They whispered about the fiancé's family, about the debts, about the cracks they could no longer ignore. Invitations were rescinded, alliances shifted, admiration soured into suspicion. As for my daughter, she didn't call. She didn't appear at my door. Perhaps she hated me for what I had done. Perhaps she felt betrayed. But deep down, I knew the truth. I hadn't betrayed her. I had saved her. She had chosen to protect appearances over me. But I had chosen to protect her future over her pride. And maybe one day, when the dust settled, she would understand. One evening, I walked through the garden, the cool air brushing against my skin. The flowers I had planted years ago were blooming again, resilient despite neglect, bending with the wind but never breaking. I smiled faintly, realizing they were a reflection of me. A mother's love bends. It bends through rejection, through humiliation, through years of distance, but it does not break. And though she had tried to erase me, I had reminded her, and everyone else, that I was still here, that I always would be. Slow emotional fade out, 200-300 words. There is a particular ache that only mothers know, the ache of being both the foundation and the forgotten. We build our children's worlds, we pour ourselves into their futures, and then, sometimes, they turn their backs as though we were never there. It is a grief deeper than death, because the person you mourn is still alive. And yet, even in that ache, there is resilience. A mother does not disappear. She adapts, she waits, and when she is underestimated, she rises in ways no one expects. I did not raise my voice. I did not scream or beg. I let the truth do the speaking, and in the end, it was enough. If you are listening to my story, and you've ever felt invisible in your own family, know this. You are not as powerless as they want you to believe. Still, water runs deep. And when the time is right, your strength will surface. Undeniable. As for me, I don't know what the future holds with my daughter. Maybe she will come back, maybe she won't. But I do know this. I will no longer let anyone erase me. And neither should you. If you've ever been in this situation, I want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments, or tell me, would you forgive, or would you take your own quiet revenge? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like mine. Because sometimes, the truth we bury is the one that sets us free.